I am happy. Those were her exact words that morning, spoken like the whisper of a promise. Now, the memory makes my stomach twist. I can still hear Laura's voice, bright and lilting, echoing through our kitchen as the sunlight refracted in her hair. God, how I wanted to believe her, how I wanted that happiness to be real. But now, every time I replay the scene, it feels like a funeral dirge, the final nails hammered into a coffin I didn't even realize I was standing beside. Because for the longest time, I believed I was the one who made her happy. I see that morning in disjointed flashes, her in a pale blue blouse, hair pinned loosely, leaning against the counter with a mug of tea. Steam rose in soft curls around her face. I remember the smell of honey and chamomile, and how she said those 3 words. Then she smiled in that bright, effortless way that used to melt the tension right off my shoulders. Used to. Now, it only carves deeper lines into my expression whenever I recall it. I don't see her lips curving up anymore. I see betrayal. Because that day, unbeknownst to me, she was hours away from stepping out the door and into someone else's arms. At first, this recollection was a sweet comfort, evidence that I must have been doing something right as a husband. But once I discovered the truth, the memory turned vile. I replay it and feel nauseous, like walking in on a private joke that was never intended for me. I am happy. Happy with him. Happy with the lie. That's how I now interpret it. That's how it tastes in my mouth. Bitter as acid. It didn't start with the DNA test. In hindsight, the seeds had been planted long before. But for me, the official unraveling began one night with a call. My phone buzzed at an ungodly hour. My eyes were still heavy with sleep as I picked up. Her voice came through, trembling on the other end. "I missed," she whispered. That's all she said. Or maybe she said more, but that's the line that stuck. Like she was speaking code. My groggy brain couldn't piece it together. "Laura," I murmured. "Where are you? What do you mean?" The call ended. Silence. Pure, suffocating silence. I bolted upright in bed. Our bed. The sheets on her side were untouched. So many nights she'd been away on business. So many excuses. My pulse slammed in my ears. I dialed back, but no answer. Over and over, the ringtone droned, and with every ring, the pit in my gut deepened. By the time dawn broke, I found a manila envelope in our mailbox. No return address. Inside were the DNA results, the test I never realized she'd had run. My name was on the form, typed neatly. And so was another name, Mark Daniels, the father. Father. I couldn't breathe. My legs shook as though refusing to carry me. It was as if the entire universe had shifted 1 inch to the left, disorienting me completely. We didn't have children. We tried. We lost one. And we never tried again. That was years ago. She never said anything about being pregnant now. I stood on our porch in my wrinkled t-shirt and sweats, reading the lines of the letter again and again. The daylight seemed too bright. The words on the page too sharp. It read, "Probability of paternity. Not mine." The flight attendant's face flickered in my mind, an image I recalled from a chance meeting at the airport months earlier. A tall guy with easy charm and a confident grin. Laura had introduced him casually, called him a friend from work. No big deal. Right. Some friend. That was Mark. I don't know why his face suddenly appeared, but there it was. It haunted me. Something inside me cracked open. Rage, shock, betrayal. Maybe all 3. When I finally stumbled back inside, I dropped everything on the kitchen table and sank into a chair. My hands were trembling. There was a note in Laura's handwriting beneath the envelope. "If you read this, then I left." Such a simple statement, scrawled in her fluid, slanted script. Left me. Left home. Left us. The finality of it cut deeper than any blade. In that single moment, my illusions disintegrated. The vow, the ring, the quiet dinners, the laughter, the "I am happy," All of it evaporated into the stale air. Everything we had was now a stage prop for a twisted performance. And I was the foolish husband who never saw the wire behind the magic trick. I tried to call her again, and again got only that crushing void. The next day, I found out she'd moved her things while I was at work. Sure, it wasn't everything. Just enough to make the closet look like it was missing a few crucial items. Enough to feel like a ghost had passed through, selectively erasing her presence. That was how I learned that Mark, this flight attendant with the easy grin, had become more than a friend. Far more. It's hard to recount the next few days accurately, because I was in a fog. My mind replayed that single memory. I am happy. And twisted it into shapes that made me want to tear my hair out. The betrayal was humiliating, not just because she chose another man, but because I, David Miller, was too blind to see it. I prided myself on being an investigative journalist. I made my living exposing hidden truths, shining a light into dark corners. And here in my own home, I'd missed the biggest story of my life. I found a thread of purpose in my anger. I printed out an old Word document I titled 100 Reasons Why You Are Not Forgiven. Initially, it had been a silly, half-joking exercise I'd used during a rough patch to air grievances. Petty annoyances, small resentments, the things husbands and wives sometimes accumulate like dust in the corners. But now, spurred by raw anger, I finished that list for real. One reason after another, venom dripping from my fingers, each line feeding my simmering rage. By the time I was done, it felt like a bizarre act of justice, my condemnation of her infidelity. But I didn't give it to her. I gave it to myself. A reminder. A vow. I would not simply accept this. I would not just be the abandoned husband. That list turned into my twisted manifesto. I tacked it on the corkboard in my study, every reason scrawled out in bold print, pinned for me to see. It fueled me, gave me the justification I needed to confront the situation head-on, to do something about this humiliation that threatened to devour me from within. For all my life, I'd relied on words. Words were my weapon, my shield, my currency. So I turned them against her, even when she wasn't there to read them. I called her phone. Voicemail. I left messages that started politely enough. Then they morphed into frustration, anger, desperation. I demanded she come back to talk. She didn't. I threatened to leave her packing boxes out on the driveway. Still no answer. That silence was monstrous. It swallowed me whole. Eventually, she responded with a single text. Stop. That was it. One word. I stared at it, uncomprehending. She wanted me to stop. Stop calling, stop writing, stop existing in her life. The nerve of it. I felt my blood pound so hard I thought I'd pass out. And that's when I made the mistake. In my fury, I called Mark. I'd found his number in her phone records, the ones I pulled from our joint account. A few keystrokes, and I had him on the line. It was late. I pictured him in some anonymous hotel room, the faint hum of a mini fridge in the background. My voice came out ragged, but I tried to sound collected. You're with my wife, I said, my jaw clenched. You know that. There was a pause. Then a strained exhale. David, he said, voice calm. I'm sorry you had to find out like this. A standard line. Polished. He probably used it with disgruntled passengers, giving them free drink coupons, promising them a better seat next flight. My anger surged, but I reeled it in, forced it behind my teeth. You're sorry, I said, enunciating each syllable. That's good. That helps a lot. He hesitated. Look, it wasn't supposed to happen. I hung up. I couldn't bear to hear the rest. My heart hammered so loudly in my ears I could barely think. I stared at the phone, half expecting it to ring again. It didn't. Mark Daniels, flight attendant, and father of a child that may or may not exist, was my wife's new bed partner. Or was. Or is. I had no confirmation of her pregnancy beyond that test. Maybe it was the past. Maybe she'd miscarried. My head spun with possibilities. each one a barbed wire coiling around my sanity. I told myself I wanted revenge, but it wasn't enough to just want it. I had to figure out how. A part of me, a small, shameful part, wanted to see them suffer, to see Laura regret every moment she'd locked lips with that man. Another part of me still ached at the thought of losing her. The contradiction ripped me apart. Work became my refuge. My editor, Pam, gave me a few local stories to chase. Nothing earth-shattering, but enough to occupy my mind. Investigative journalism runs on facts and leads, and I poured myself into it. I tried to bury my personal meltdown beneath interviews, data analysis, and late-night coffee. But in every quiet moment, I felt the burn of betrayal under my skin. I carried that raw wound everywhere, festering into resentment. One evening, while rummaging through old files in my home office, I found another letter, one that Laura had once given me for our anniversary. It was short, filled with platitudes about eternal love, about how she saw me as her rock. "Thank you for always being here," she'd written. I read it again and again, my throat tightening. Then I tore it apart, piece by piece, until it was a confetti of broken words on the carpet. That was the exact moment I vowed not just to get her back, or to talk things out, but to twist the knife. She had humiliated me, so I would return the favor. Yes, it was ugly. I was ugly. Grief and anger can do that to a man. They can warp your reflection until you no longer recognize yourself. I told her in a voicemail, calmly, that I understood everything now, that I forgave her. I needed her to hear that word, forgive. It was a lie, of course. But I wanted her guard down. I wanted her to believe I might be docile, pliant, maybe even cooperative. It was all part of a plan that wasn't fully formed in my head yet, but it gave me a dark sense of purpose. Finally, she texted, "We can talk if you want, but I won't come home." Perfect. I arranged to meet at a cafe, a neutral spot. My heart hammered as I took a seat at a small table in the corner, the overhead lights casting a sterile glow on the polished floors. Laura arrived 5 minutes late. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept. Her eyes darted around, avoiding mine at first. She ordered a latte. I ordered black coffee, though my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the mug. For a while, we sat in silence, the conversation buffered by the hiss of the espresso machine. She cleared her throat, glanced at me. "David, I'm not here for apologies," I cut in, trying to sound composed. "I just want to understand." A partial truth. I did want to understand, but more than that, I wanted to see if I could corner her. She sighed, eyes lowered. "I couldn't tell you. I wanted to, but it was never easy." I studied her face. My own wife felt like a stranger, every subtle shift in her expression fueling my sense of betrayal. Was I that oblivious? I asked, swallowing the bitterness. She pressed her lips together. "No, I was good at hiding it." Then, quietly, she added, "I'm sorry." I forced a nod, as though I accepted it. But inside, fury coiled. "Tell me," I said. "Why him?" Her eyes flickered. "I don't know. He was there. He listened. He didn't judge me. You were always so busy." She paused, then mustered a faint, painful smile. "He made me feel alive, David. I'm sorry that hurts, but it's the truth." My gut twisted. I wanted to lash out, to call her vile names, but I forced a different approach. "I see," I said softly, using a phrase I realized I often repeated. In that moment, I hated how it sounded. Weak. Passive. "So, what now?" Laura sighed. "I've moved in with him, just temporarily. I'm not pregnant anymore." A flicker of sadness crossed her features. There was a complication. "It's over." Her words felt like a punch to the jaw. Another swirl of conflicting emotions, rage, confusion, maybe even pity. And so my reprisal took a backseat for a heartbeat as I grappled with that. "When?" She closed her eyes briefly, tears pooling behind her lids. A few weeks ago, I didn't know how to tell you. 100 cutting remarks jammed in my throat. I pictured them as shards of broken glass, but I swallowed them. Calm. Control. That was my mantra now. Anger was still there, but I needed her to think I was subdued. I see, I repeated. The phrase sounded hollow, robotic. I really am sorry, she whispered. I never wanted to hurt you. Hurt me. The biggest understatement of the decade. That conversation lasted maybe half an hour longer. Her explaining, me nodding in that subdued, mechanical way. And with each word, my illusions cracked and collapsed. She confessed to starting the affair a year prior. She told Mark she was separated from me. A lie, obviously. And Mark, he apparently believed her. Another lie. Or maybe he knew. I didn't care. I just needed to appear calm and accepting until the moment was right. We ended that meeting in a hush. She stood to leave, stared at me with an expression I can only describe as regret. She touched my hand briefly, then turned and left the cafe. I watched her walk away. My mind roared with a single thought. She's leaving me again. For him. And she's sorry. Right. Apologies and pity. That's all I get. The next weeks were a blur of half-formed schemes and tense phone calls. She said she'd file for divorce. I told her I'd handle the paperwork. Our conversation devolved into logistical negotiations about assets, finances, who gets the house, etc. But behind every word, I sensed her relief, like she finally had permission to move on. That stung deeper than I can convey. I tried to poke at Mark's life from behind the scenes. I used my journalism connections to glean tidbits about him. I tracked his social media, found photos of him smiling in exotic locales. My wife was in some of those pictures, a faint silhouette in the background, his arm around her waist in front of a beach. Their faces pressed close in an airplane cockpit, some promotional photo for the airline. Each image tore another hole in my chest. I realized one night, while glaring at their pictures on my laptop, that I wanted to destroy him. It wasn't just about stealing my wife. It was about humiliating me, making a fool of me. So I decided to provoke her, yes, but mostly I wanted to provoke him. I wanted them to slip up, to see their carefully spun fantasy unravel. Part of me despised the man I was becoming. Cunning, vindictive, consumed by vengeance. But I couldn't stop myself. My anger had an iron grip. I began messaging Mark's airline, filing anonymous complaints. Petty, I know, but I was testing the waters. Then I orchestrated a small, underhanded trap. A tabloid story I'd pitched to an online gossip site about flight attendants fraternizing with married women. I leaked Mark's name. It was a risk. An unprofessional, borderline unethical act for a journalist. But I was too deep in my fury to care. The piece ran, a brief scandal that might cost him some face at work. Did it satisfy me? A little. The thought that he'd have to answer questions from higher-ups made me grin in the darkness of my study. But it wasn't enough. Laura called me. David, what the hell is this article? She demanded. Her voice crackled with anger. We know it was you. You're trying to ruin his career. I let silence hang. Laura, I finally said, feigning innocence, I have no idea what you're talking about. Why would I even do that? She spat out a bitter laugh. Because you're vindictive. Because you think this will fix anything. I breathed in slowly. Fix. I'm just living my life. If Mark can't handle a little scrutiny, maybe he should have thought twice before hooking up with a married woman. She was quiet for a beat. You need to stop, she hissed, a tremor in her voice. No, I said, calm and cold. I don't think I will. Then I hung up. Her reaction rattled me in ways I didn't anticipate. I realized how far I'd fallen. But ironically, that only pushed me further. That old list of 100 reasons why you are not forgiven glared at me from the corkboard every time I entered my office. Each line felt like a testament to the pain she caused. I pinned new notes, new motivations, scribbled lines about Mark. I was forcing her to become the villain, or maybe forcing myself to see her that way, so I could justify the path I was on. One morning, I discovered a letter taped to my front door. Not in Laura's handwriting, but Mark's. It read, "Stop going after my job, or I'll take this to the authorities. I know what you're doing." That was it. A threat. My chest thrummed with anticipation. He was playing right into my hands, giving me the friction I craved, the confrontation I believed would restore my shredded dignity. I cornered him in a parking lot near the airport. I'd followed him after he got off a late shift. It was stupid, impulsive. I was supposed to be in control, but my aggression boiled over. He'd just unlocked his car when I approached from behind. "You think I'm scared?" I snarled before he could spin around. My fists were clenched so tight they ached. "You think I don't have more I can do?" He whirled, surprise flaring in his hazel eyes. "David, you're out of line." I cut him off by shoving him against the car. It wasn't a knockout punch, more like a quick, desperate attempt to intimidate him. My heart pounded. I wanted a physical confrontation, something raw and real to match what I felt inside. He recovered his balance and pushed me back hard. I stumbled, nearly losing my footing. "Don't make me call the police," Mark snapped. The casual, charismatic grin I'd seen in pictures was gone, replaced by tension, annoyance, maybe fear. I glared at him, my breathing ragged. "You ruined my life, and you have the audacity to threaten me. You." I ground my teeth, searching for the right words but finding only a red haze. "You took my wife. You took everything." He shook his head. "She wasn't happy, man. You can blame me all you want. But this, what you're doing, it's pathetic." That last word stung so badly I nearly swung at him. But I froze, fists trembling, because a small part of me recognized the truth in it. In that moment, I despised him, but I also despised myself. With an angry, guttural sound, I turned and stormed away. I heard him call after me. "Sort out your own issues, David. Don't drag me into your meltdown." I didn't turn around. I'd expected the confrontation to bring some kind of catharsis, but it didn't. Instead, it left me feeling more humiliated than ever. I had wanted to look strong, but I'd only come off unhinged. That night, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, stubble grown unruly, hair disheveled. I was unraveling, and ironically, that meant Laura and Mark were winning. They'd found their new normal, while I was left clawing at old wounds. A few days later, I heard from Laura again. Her voice was weary, deflated. "I want you to stop this madness," she said. "I understand you're hurt, but you're not leaving me any choice. Any choice." My jaw tensed. "You left me no choice the day you walked out," I hissed. She hesitated. "I'm filing the divorce papers, David. This week. Please don't make it harder than it has to be." The final blow. My limbs felt cold, numb. "Fine," I said after a long pause. "Do what you have to do." She exhaled. "Someday, maybe you'll see that none of this had to happen like this. We could have parted ways without." She seemed to choke on her words. "You used to be so kind. I'm sorry for everything. But this is too far." I let her apology drift into the silent corners of the house. "Goodbye," I said, and ended the call. Then I went to my computer, pulled up the 100 Reasons document, and read every line again. Anger coalesced with despair. She wanted me to see that none of this had to happen, as if there was some alternate universe where I wouldn't be destroyed by her betrayal. I wasn't done with them. I refused to let them walk off into the sunset. I suspected Mark was traveling soon, given his line of work, so I placed an anonymous tip to airport security, insinuating that I'd overheard him bragging about smuggling something. It was a vile, desperate move, but I didn't care. I wanted him in trouble. I wanted to watch them both squirm. It worked, to an extent. Security detained him for questioning. No charges stuck, but it was humiliating for him, made him miss a flight, tarnished his record. He knew it was me, but I was nowhere to be found. I had gotten what I wanted. A momentary taste of power. When Laura found out, she arrived at the house the same night, unannounced, looking like a storm about to burst. I opened the door, and there she stood, face flushed, eyes bright with anger. For a moment, I didn't even recognize the warm, gentle woman I'd married. She was trembling. "How could you?" she demanded, voice cracking. She stepped into the foyer, eyes locked on mine. He almost lost his job. "Are you proud of yourself?" I stared at her, my chest tight. "Yes," I said simply, because in that twisted moment I was. Her lower lip quivered. You're sick." I laughed, a short, mirthless bark. "I might be, but I'm not the one who lied for a year." "Whoa," she slapped me. The crack of her palm against my cheek rang in the hallway. For a stunned second, the sting radiated, and all I felt was raw shock. Then the anger returned like a wave. I grabbed her wrist, but I couldn't bring myself to push her away. The hatred in my heart warred with the memories of a woman I once adored. She yanked free. "I came here to tell you that if you don't stop, Mark will press charges. I will too. We can't live under your harassment anymore." Those words stung. Harassment. I was the wronged husband, and yet she painted me as the criminal. Then I realized, in a way, I had become one. I was crossing lines left and right, and I couldn't muster the clarity to care. "Do it," I spat. "Call the cops. Sue me. Doesn't change the fact that you're the one who destroyed everything first." We glared at each other. The tension was so thick I could hardly breathe. For a moment, I thought she might swing at me again, or scream, or something. But then she just collapsed against the wall, burying her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with muffled sobs. I froze, unsure whether to be furious or to comfort her. My instincts warred. Eventually, I slowly extended a hand. She pushed it away. The sound of her crying burned a hole in my chest. Once upon a time, I would have given anything to stop her tears. Now, my mind seethed with rage. The conflict nearly paralyzed me. After a long minute, she pulled herself upright, tears streaking her mascara. "I hate this," she whispered. "I hate what you're doing. I hate what I did. I hate it all." I said nothing. We stood there in the gloom of the hallway, silent. Slowly, she turned and walked out. I didn't follow. Her footsteps faded into the night, and I realized I was shaking. My entire body was trembling with adrenaline. I slammed the door, the echo of it bouncing off the empty walls. Then I sank to my knees, pressed my forehead against the wood, and let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a roar. For days after, I hardly slept. My phone beeped with messages from friends who'd heard rumors, people who wanted to know if everything was okay. I ignored them. My mind was consumed by the question, what now? I'd orchestrated a petty revenge. She threatened me with charges, and yet none of it delivered the relief I thought it would. A small part of me recognized that this path led nowhere good. If I kept pushing, I'd wind up in real legal trouble. I might lose everything. My job, my house, my freedom. But the thought of stopping, of letting them live happily ever after, was like swallowing broken glass. I teetered on a razor's edge. One evening, I typed out a final letter to Laura, 100 reasons why you are not forgiven. The manifesto in full. I planned to mail it to her, to rub salt in her emotional wounds. I told myself it would be the final blow, the final twist of the knife. Then I typed the last line. You left me in silence, and so silence will be the reason you'll remember me. Self-righteous, self-pitying. I didn't care. With trembling fingers, I put it in an envelope, sealed it. But as I stared at her address scrawled on the front, something snapped. I realized that sending this letter would do nothing but confirm how broken and bitter I'd become. The man who once loved her more than any truth, more than any sense, would be unrecognizable. Did I really want to give her the satisfaction of knowing I'd been undone? Or did I want to reclaim some shred of dignity? I tore the envelope in half, then in half again. I dropped the pieces into the trash can and watched them settle on top of stale coffee grounds. My breath shook as if I'd just run a mile. That night, I found myself in the living room, sitting in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The only light came from a dim lamp in the corner, and I realized how quiet the house was without her. Without us. Silence had become the backdrop of my life. It weighed heavier than I ever imagined possible. I saw the ghost of the conversation we once had in this very room. Her laughter, the distant ring of music we used to play. All gone. My world had become an echo chamber of regrets. I closed my eyes, took in a ragged breath. This was the cost of my revenge. An empty house and a heart so twisted with resentment that I scarcely recognized myself. In the end, I'd hurt them, sure, but I'd ripped myself apart in the process. We still had to finalize the divorce. I received official papers from her attorney, neat and impersonal. I skimmed them, feeling a hollow ache in my chest. My pen hovered over the signature line for minutes. Then, with a trembling hand, I signed. Each stroke of the pen felt like a final severing of the man I used to be. 3 days later, I found a letter in my mailbox, handwritten from Laura. In it, she explained that she and Mark were leaving for a while, traveling to the West Coast. She apologized again, said she didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted me to know she never set out to cause this much pain. She ended with, "I hope one day you'll find the happiness you deserve, even if it's without me." My chest tightened reading it. I realized I didn't want her pity, nor did I want her apology. What I wanted was the woman I married, the one who once said, "I am happy," and meant it. But that woman was gone, replaced by a memory so contaminated I could hardly stand to recall it. I took the letter to my office and read it over. I wanted to burn it, the way I'd destroy her old anniversary note. Instead, I placed it in a drawer. I couldn't let go of that last tangible piece of her. Maybe it was pathetic, but it felt like the last vestige of something real, even if it was overshadowed by betrayal. That night, sleep didn't come easily. When it did, I dreamt of her walking away, arm in arm with Mark. Her eyes turned back to glance at me only once. No sadness, no anger, just a neutral farewell. I jolted awake in a cold sweat, my heart pounding against my ribs. Weeks passed. The final hearing for the divorce arrived. We didn't speak much, aside from curt nods. Mark wasn't there, obviously. On the record, everything was straightforward. The house would remain in my name, finances split according to the agreement. She had no interest in keeping memories of our shared life, just wanted to move on. The gavel came down, and that was that. Laura was no longer my wife. I was no longer her husband. Driving home, I felt an emptiness so profound it was almost a physical wave on my chest. I pulled into the driveway, noticing how quiet the street was, how the evening sun cast long shadows over the lawn. The final words from the court still echoed in my ears. It was over. So why did I feel like I was suffocating? Stepping inside, I braced myself against the door. The house was cold, despite the warm weather. I flicked on the light. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, except it felt unrecognizable without the hope of her return. My reflection in the hallway mirror startled me. Gaunt, eyes sunken, face etched with lines of anger and grief. I looked older, broken. Was I still David Miller, or just a husk shaped by bitterness? I realized, in the hush of that moment, the deeper truth. I had turned my wife into a villain, and maybe she deserved some measure of blame. But I had become a monster in my own right. The revenge, the petty sabotage, the endless hateful thoughts, it all devoured my soul. And for what? She was gone. Whether she ended up happy or not, that was her path to walk. I was left with an echo, a barren house, and no sense of who I was anymore. In the weeks following, I withdrew from everything. My job, My friendships. I let them slip. I spent hours in the living room, staring at nothing, occasionally glimpsing her shape moving through the hallway in my peripheral vision. A ghost, a memory. I told myself I'd forget her eventually, that I'd heal. But the humiliation, the sense of being reduced to a desperate, vengeful man, wouldn't let go so easily. One evening, I decided to box up our old photos. I gathered them from the living room shelves, from the dusty frames in the bedroom. I found pictures of our wedding day, her in a simple white dress, me in a plain black tux, both smiling as if the future was ours to command. A surge of anguish filled my chest. I wanted to tear the photo in half, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I slid it into the box with trembling fingers. When I reached the last photo, I paused. It was from a winter trip to the mountains, long before her affair began. She stood in a knit hat, cheeks pink from the cold, her arm wrapped around me. And I was grinning. Truly, deeply grinning. Something about that memory made me recoil in disgust. I shoved the photo away and closed the box. Then I tucked it into the back of a closet, burying it beneath old blankets, as if that could bury the pain. Time passed in a haze. I didn't keep track of the days, let alone the weeks. Occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of Mark's face on social media, or see a mention of Laura's name in passing. But each time, I closed the page or shut my phone, refusing to dwell. My anger was still there, but it was overshadowed by a suffocating emptiness. My attempts at revenge had left me with nothing but more wounds. I sank deeper, losing track of my once sharp mind. My editor, Pam, approached me at work. "David, you're barely hitting deadlines. Your last piece was disjointed." Concern lined her features. "Are you okay?" I wanted to snap, to tell her to mind her own business, but I didn't have the energy. "I'll do better," I muttered. "Just going through something." She studied me for a moment, then sighed. "Look, take a leave if you need. We can't have you spiraling like this. You know we care about you." I forced a nod, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. "I'm fine," I lied. But I wasn't. My life had become a daily exercise in existing, in breathing, nothing more. I tried to pick up the shards, but every time I moved, I felt them cutting deeper. I recall the phone call that changed things. It came weeks later, from Mark. Oddly enough, his voice was quieter, more measured. "Look, I want to bury the hatchet," he said. "Laura says you've been quiet. I'm done fighting." I was stunned into silence. My chest tightened with resentment. Bury the hatchet. The nerve. Yet I also felt an odd surge of relief. The war was over, apparently. "I have nothing to say to you," I managed, though my tone wasn't as venomous as before. He sighed. "Just know, I didn't come into this wanting to break your marriage. Laura told me you two were separated." I closed my eyes, swallowing a bitter laugh. What difference does that make now? None, I guess. A heavy pause. "We're moving again soon. Possibly out of the country. You won't have to see either of us again. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how it all happened." The word hung in the air. I pictured his face, that easy grin replaced by regret. "Fine," I said at last, voice tight. "Goodbye, Mark." The line clicked dead, and I realized that was it, the last conversation. It ended not with a bang, but with a subdued, anticlimactic exhale. In the days that followed, I tried to reflect. All that rage, that thirst for vengeance, what did it achieve except to carve out my own soul and leave it raw? The silence of my house now stood as a monument to everything I'd lost, or everything I'd destroyed. Because yes, Laura betrayed me, but I had responded with a darkness that overshadowed the original sin. In trying to make her pay, I'd only inflicted more wounds on myself. It was around that time I packed up her old letter. "If you read this, then I left," and stuffed it in the same closet with the photos. I realized that letter, those words, would forever echo in the empty hallways, a reminder of how she walked out and never came back. But I had to start letting go, piece by piece, even if it took me the rest of my life. I found a therapist. At first, I hated the idea, felt it was weakness, felt it was unmanly. But I went, sat in a small office with dull beige walls, and started to talk. Bit by bit, I unraveled the story, though it burned my tongue to speak about it. I felt the humiliation rise fresh in my throat, but the therapist listened calmly, never judging, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of light in the darkness. Months have passed since the divorce was finalized, and now I stand in my empty bedroom, gazing at the dent in the wall from where I once threw a lamp in a fit of rage. I never bothered to fix it. Maybe I should. Maybe it's time. As I look around the house, the silence still resonates, but it no longer crushes me as it once did. Instead, it reminds me of the cost of secrets, the depth of betrayal, and the savage hunger for revenge that nearly destroyed me. I am happy. Her words still ring like a ghostly refrain in my ears, but I understand now that happiness can be a fleeting illusion. She was happy, briefly, with him. Or maybe she wasn't. Maybe it was just something she told herself to justify her actions. I'll never truly know. The life we shared, the illusions we kept, that's all buried under the rubble of our mutual choices. I remain haunted by that final phone call, that final threat, the final letter. Each memory is a scar on the fabric of my identity. But slowly, I'm learning to live with it. To accept that the man who sought petty vengeance was me, but also not the best of me. I can't take back what I did or how I let my anger consume me. All I can do is move forward. Sometimes I step out onto the back porch at night, stare at the stars, and imagine a life that might have been. A child, a family, quiet Sunday mornings in bed. But that's an alternate universe now, one that died the night she said, I missed, and the world spun out from under my feet. There's no going back. In the end, I learned that revenge doesn't heal anything. It only deepens the wounds. The silence she left behind became the real reason for everything that followed. I tried to fill it with anger, but anger only made it heavier. I see that now, and though the silence remains, I'm beginning to hear something else, a faint resonance of possibility, a chance, maybe, to forgive myself for how I failed, how I fought back, how I fell apart. It's quiet now. The walls still hold the echoes of our arguments, our laughter, our betrayals. I feel the chill in my bones at times, remembering the night I found out about Mark, the flight attendant with the easy grin. I remember the humiliation, the rage, the unstoppable wave of retribution. But I also remember the cost. I paid for it with my own soul. I have no illusions left. I'm just a man trying to piece together what remains, staring at the coffin of what I once called love, saying my final goodbye to the ghost of what might have been. And now, in the silent aftermath, I realize that the only path left is forward, carrying this burden of memory with me until it grows lighter or until I grow stronger. Because that's what life demands, that we endure and find meaning in the ruins. Some nights, I still hear her whisper, I am happy, and a pang of regret follows. But I'm learning, slowly, to let that phrase pass without latching on. Perhaps one day, it won't hurt at all. Perhaps one day, I'll be able to say those words for myself again. For now, I just stand here, letting the silence fill every corner, hoping that out of this wreckage, I can rebuild into something new. And that is the final truth I've been left with.